Hey guys, Lou here to break down the NFL Saturday special. We have the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we have the Baltimore Ravens versus the Cleveland Browns. So I'm going to break down my approach to this slate and figure out how to win $300,000. So in this video, I'll go over a little bit of my process that I do week over week when building DFS lineups. I am not a large-scale player. As I mentioned in previous videos, I just do a handful of lineups at a time and hope for the best. But just because I go through this process and look at all these different sites and resources to determine which player to enter into my lineup doesn't mean you need to. You can take bits and pieces of this and refine your process, or you can ignore everything I do and just keep doing what you're doing if it works for you. But in my profession, building products and features, you need to have some sort of data point to validate your assumption before you go and build that thing. So it's the same thing, even with stocks like Bitcoin. You use technical analysis, fundamental analysis, whatever metric or data point you have to give you the confidence to invest in something. It's no different with DFS. So I look at a bunch of different data points before I enter a player into my lineup to have the confidence knowing that this player is going to perform and meet expectations and hopefully exceed expectations, because that's what gets you to the top of the contest to win all of that money. So we're going to take a look at this slate. I'll go over all of the players that I like, my strategy, and see if we can take this contest down. Oh, one other thing I mentioned. I finally have a logo. You guys will probably see it in the top corner here. I'm calling myself the DFS Data Dad. I love DFS, I love data, and I'm a dad. So why not combine all of them together? Well, with the help of my wife coming up with this name. So I reach out to a designer on Upwork, got a quick mock-up of this. I like the color scheme. It's clean, it's vibrant, it's simple. It's all I need. So now I'm going by the DFS Data Dad, and we're here to help you guys win some money. So the very first thing that I look at when I'm approaching a slate is point totals and what team is projected to score a lot of points. So we have a very short slate here. Odds of getting a duplicated lineup is very possible. The field is going to gravitate towards a lot of players. They're going to gain a lot of ownership. So we're going to try to do a deep dive to figure out where our leverage is and where we can take advantage of that to try to get ourselves to the top. So I'll just go through my thoughts of how I see the game script playing out for all of these games and what meaning, if any, there are behind these games. So first up, we have the Ravens and the Browns with a point total of 41 points. The Ravens are 20-point favorites in this game. What the Ravens are playing for is the 3 seed, locking up home field advantage. So if the Ravens lose and the Steelers win, they will flip and the Ravens will become the 6th seed. But if the Ravens win, it really doesn't matter for the Steelers. The Steelers are just playing for the 5th or 6th seed at that point. So what I see happening in this game is the Ravens getting out to an early lead and then pulling starters, and all of the Ravens pieces that you invested in are going to need to get all of their points early, and all the backups are going to come in. So there's one player in particular on the Ravens side that I like, if that script plays out completely, that we'll get to in a little bit. And then we have the Bengals and Steelers. So the Bengals are playing to get in. If they win and the Broncos lose, the Bengals are in. The Bengals have needed a lot to happen in order to be in this situation, and it has all played out. I do think that their luck is going to run out. Their luck is going to run out a little bit because the Broncos are playing the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are pulling all of their starters. I think the Broncos are projected to win by like 11 or 12 points or something is the spread. But this is going to be a competitive game. The seeding matters for the Steelers, I think. I think they'd prefer to be the number 5 seed instead of the number 6 seed and having to play the Ravens. So I think there's a lot of incentive there for them to play all of their starters. So if you played NFL DFS before, you'll know that stacking is a very common strategy to win tournaments. I'll be stacking here, and I'm trying to pick the offenses where it's very easy to project where the ball is going. So as of late, the Bengals have been really hot. The ball has been going to two players 50% of the time, and that's Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So I usually come here, try to look at what the target share is looking like for all of these teams. I really don't have any interest in the Cleveland Browns because of Bailey Zappi being the starting quarterback. But you can see here the Ravens offense is a little more spread out. Zay Flowers does capture a lot of the target share here, up to 30%. But then it's really hard to project outside of him who else the ball is going to go to, outside of Lamar and Derrick Henry running the ball. And then the same can be said for the Steelers. They use two running backs. They like to run the ball a lot with Arthur Smith calling the plays. Outside of Freiermuth and Pickens, there really are no other wideouts that are going to get a lot of the target share. Maybe Calvin Austin is a good GPP play to sprinkle in there because he can break a long touchdown at any given point. So yeah, you can see based on last week, Freiermuth and Pickens accounted for 41% of the target share. So I do think a Steelers stack is viable in this tournament. Next thing I usually take a look at is snap count. So you really want to get guys that are going to be on the field all the time. I usually go to Fantasy Pros, sort by percentage, and then just position by position go in and look at some guys. So if there's a player I want to particularly look up, I'll usually sort by team. But in this case, you could just do Control F, and let's say I want to take a look at Keaton Mitchell, right? Because he's just coming back from injury. The Ravens are projected to score a lot of points. Maybe they pull Derrick Henry, and Keaton Mitchell starts to get all the action. So last week he played 27% of the snaps to Derrick Henry's 65. Justice Hill is going to be out again, and the other rookie, Rasheen Ali, played 8% of the snaps. So we'll get to this in a little more when we go to build lineups, but Keaton Mitchell has been somebody who's on my radar for this slate to try to get some leverage off of all the other Ravens players that might be getting some ownership. So definitely want to check out snap counts and target players that are going to be on the field a lot. Another thing I want to take a look at is expected ownership. So I'll usually go to RotoWire, sort by roster percentage. So the top players here on the slate, I feel like it's no surprise to see Derrick Henry up top, but I think it is a surprise to see him in 91% of the lineups. He's going to have to do all of his damage early in the game before they get yanked. Honestly, Derrick Henry is someone I'm looking to fade. That's what you have to do with DFS, right? You have to make a stand. This is a bit of a risky one because he's the best running back on the slate. I'm not saying I'm going to completely fade him. My four lineups, I might just have him in one. I'll try to gain leverage that way. It's a risk, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. And then we have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Baltimore Ravens. So if the slate plays out to be, exactly what we're projecting, there's going to be a lot of duplicate lineups. You're going to need to find ways to get unique somewhere else. But Jamar Chase is garnering a lot of ownership at nearly 90% as well. T. Higgins at 60%. I don't know how accurate these estimations are, but I kind of just use it as a guide to better understand where the field is going when they're thinking about players to roster as well. So you can go by position. You can do all, you can do flex. I usually just do a quick sweep to see what ownership is looking like before I get to building my lineups. And then the other tool I use, you have to pay for this, but I go to pff.com to try to get the pass blocking advantage, run blocking advantages from each teams, looking at things like yards before contact for the offensive line and yards before contact given by the defensive line, seeing how often quarterbacks are pressured, how often those pressures are converted into sacks. Also really helpful when trying to figure out a defense to play. And then I usually go and look at the wide receiver cornerback matchups to see which wide receivers have the most advantageous matchups. and kind of try to overlay that with game script and point totals. So you can see here this week, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, they have the best matchup based on the cornerbacks that will be covering them. And then with this tool, if you do decide to sign up and pay for it, you can see the individual matchups and the projected snaps for each wide receiver cornerback combination. And then the other thing that you can do is take a look at defenses versus position. I feel like this one can be kind of misleading because if you look at it throughout the whole season, it's just an average. So I try to take a smaller snapshot, really looking at the past 3 weeks to see what points are looking like against quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and then also taking it a step further and seeing, who are these defenses seeing at those positions, and see if it warrants, the actual ranking, right? Like, for example, if we're 3 weeks into the season and the Kansas City Chiefs have the best defense against tight ends, but they played the Indianapolis Colts, who don't really have a tight end, and they played the LA Chargers, who don't usually use a tight end. And then, week 3, Brock Bowers comes into town, and you look at that stat and you say, well, the Chiefs are the best defense against tight end. I'm going to fade Brock Bowers because he's just not a good play here. But he goes for 10 catches and 130 yards and a touchdown, and you missed out on that opportunity. So that I feel like, the position versus defense rank could be misleading. So just use that at your own discretion and try to consider, a little more, shorter snapshot of how those defenses are performing against a particular position. But we're going to get right into it and start reviewing players here. We'll start with the quarterback position. I just need a second for my screen to load here. But we have Joe Burrow. Looking at his recent stats, he's hit 40 points, 23 points, 20, 28, 25. He has a really good floor here. Hit 25 against Pittsburgh last time they met. It was actually a high-scoring game. 82 points in this game, which is kind of absurd. But I feel like Joe Burrow is very easy to project here, and alongside his pass catchers, it's easy to project where the ball is going as well. So they need to win. They should be aggressive. It looks like they might be without Chase Brown in this game, so maybe Joe Burrow needs to lean on passing a little more than expected. Also with quarterbacks, the next one I'm looking at is surprisingly Russell Wilson. I get that Lamar is probably the best quarterback play on the slate, but I'm just a little worried about what game script looks like and then what his playing time looks like. So I think Russell Wilson is another viable play here. We just saw Bo Nix put up a pretty monster day against the Bengals defense. And if this game is anything like it was the last time they played in Week 13, we're going to see a lot of points here. So Russ is a lot cheaper than Joe Burrow by almost over $2,000, right? Russ is 53 and Burrow is 75. So yeah, $2,200 less expensive. Not as good as pass catchers, but enough where he can score points clearly. Looks like his best game did come against the Bengals, 31 points almost. So I'm going to be taking a few shots with some Steeler stacks with Russell Wilson, because I do think he can get you there, and he does still have some mobility there. Last week against the Chiefs, rushed for 55 yards and a touchdown, so that's 11 points right there, and you get that on top of all the passing that he's probably going to need to do. At the running back position, this has been up for a while, so my screen is taking some time to load. Okay, at the running back position, we have Jaylen Warren as one of my favorite plays. So as of late, Warren has really been heating up. He's still relatively cheap, only $5,800. He is getting at least 5 targets in the past few games here, and he's converted that into at least 40 yards. So you get 9 points through the air at least there, and his workload on the ground is actually increasing too. So now he's getting double-digit carries. I think Najee is still going to get all the red zone work, but Jaylen Warren is the type of player that can break off a big play, and get in the end zone without having to get any red zone touches. So I do like Jaylen Warren. As of recent, he's been getting a lot of snaps and a lot of touches. All he needs to do is fall into the end zone to really help him pay off that price tag. Next up, we have Khalil Herbert, and this is all dependent on Chase Brown not playing. He seems questionable heading into tomorrow. He did not practice the previous day. But if he is out, I think Khalil Herbert is going to absorb all of the work there. So Herbert started the year out with the Chicago Bears, did not get any playing time because it all went to Swift, and then Roschon Johnson actually jumped him on the depth chart. But I do think Khalil Herbert has some juice and can break off some big plays. I don't understand why the Bears let him go, and I don't understand why he hasn't gotten many touches with the Bengals to try to alleviate some of the workload from Chase Brown. Chase Brown is somebody who's been playing at almost 90% of the snaps. But if Khalil Herbert does fill in here for Chase Brown, he's pretty much a lock for me. Only 4 carries last game, and I think that's once Chase Brown exited. But if he takes on that full workload, I do think he can break off some big plays and get into the end zone against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's not the best matchup in terms of run blocking advantage, but this is a pure volume play. Which leads me to my next player, D'Onta Foreman. So Pierre Strong is out. Jerome Ford is out. Obviously, Nick Chubb is out. The only other running back on the roster is John Kelly. D'Onta Foreman, whenever he does get these spots, he usually hits. This is also a pure volume play. Game script suggests that he is not going to be running the ball too much because the Ravens are going to jump out to a quick lead and they'll be up by at least 20 points. At least that's what Vegas is projecting. But based on the quarterback situation, the offense might actually need to run through D'Onta Foreman. So again, another running back that is really cheap, only $4,900. Playing these cheap running backs allows you to pay up and stack those Cincinnati Bengals wide receivers with Joe Burrow. Also running it back with somebody like George Pickens is a way that I'm actually approaching this slate. So even though the Browns are severe underdogs, the fact that D'Onta Foreman is going to see all of this volume has me pretty interested in him. And the last running back that I'm interested in is Keaton Mitchell. And this is purely going off the game script theory here that the Ravens are going to jump out to a huge lead and not need to play Derrick Henry and all of their other starters. Therefore, all of the volume and work will go to Keaton Mitchell. Last game, since being back from a major injury, he got 11 rushes, obviously not very efficient on the ground, only 1.8 yards per carry, and collected his only target for 28 yards. Before he got hurt last year, he seemed like a really explosive, dynamic player. I think maybe before the playoffs, they will try to ramp up some of his activity and get him into game flow there. So I played him last week in I think the Christmas slate, and only got 5.8 points here. But for $4,300, I think it's worth the gamble. I think the Ravens know they're going to win this game, so why put all that additional stress on your starters, especially Derrick Henry, when you're going to need him for the playoffs? At the wide receiver position, I really have a few priorities, and it's really limited. Starting out with Jamar Chase, he's the best wide receiver in the game right now. He's had a monster season. He gets a massive target share, so the volume is there. He has Joe Burrow throwing him the ball, and he has a great matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though their defense is good. These corners can't cover him or my next guy, T. Higgins, who just went off for 44 points against the Denver Broncos, who actually have a good secondary. He just had a really good matchup. The guy couldn't cover him. Every time he was targeted, pretty much it's an easy touchdown when they got deep into the red zone there. So T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, they account for nearly 60% of the target share when Joe Burrow is throwing the ball. You know where it's going. You know at least one of them will get to the end zone. You know one of them is probably going to get the 100-yard bonus, and they have plenty of receptions to go along with it. So it makes sense to me to have a Burrow, Chase, Higgins stack. Another way that you can get unique is take Russell Wilson and stack him with both as well. And if you want to pay up for Derrick Henry, there might be ways of doing that. But T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, easy plays for me. On the other side of this game, if the Bengals are going to be scoring points, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to need to keep up with it. George Pickens came back last week from an injury after being out for 3 weeks. Hopefully he has one more week under his belt to get back to full health. Saw 7 targets last game for 50 yards. This is another guy who's a big-time playmaker. He's absolutely crazy. He's a nutcase, and I worry about that. But when he's on the field and you get the ball in his hands, he can take it to the house. We saw it in the playoffs last year. I think he scored 38 points in the wild card round. Something crazy like that. He has that upside. It's just whether or not he can pull it off in this spot. I do think he has a good matchup against the Bengals secondary. Last time they played, he had 6 targets, caught 3 balls for 74 yards and a touchdown. So I think he's better than that. He can get more points than that, and I project this game to be a shootout and for them to go back and forth. And then alongside George Pickens, the other wide receiver that really stands out on the Pittsburgh Steelers is Calvin Austin. Pretty good floor the past 3 weeks with 5 targets, no touchdowns, but he does have big playability. He hasn't gotten the 100-yard bonus anytime this year. Looks like his best game came against the Giants, my team, for 3 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Probably had a punt return touchdown or something to get him to the 20 points there. But he's really cheap, $4,100. He's on the field, and Russ has looked this way a few times the past 3 weeks. So again, a game that I project to be a shootout. I'm going to need to score points. Calvin Austin is also a viable target for me. Last up, we have the tight ends. There's really 2 I'm mainly looking at here. Kind of taking a stand here at tight end, but it's no surprise going with more Pittsburgh Steelers and looking at Pat Freiermuth. All of the tight ends on the slate pretty much play the same amount of snaps. It's nearly 60% of snaps. Pat Freiermuth last game saw 8 targets, caught 7 balls for 60 yards, lost a fumble, which kind of took away from his score there. But the last time the Bengals played the Steelers, he caught 6 for 68 and a touchdown, 18.8 points. I think he has a good matchup here in terms of the linebacker that will be covering him. So I do think the Steelers could look to the middle of the field and try to use Pat Freiermuth a little more. The other tight end I'm looking at, and this is kind of a huge punt play, but it's Jordan Akins. I know Mike Gesicki last week had a really, really good week, saw a lot of volume. I just think that was part of the game plan going into playing the Denver Broncos, try to use the middle of the field in case the receivers were locked up on the outside. Looks like it started out that way. They started going to Gesicki early and then realized how good of a matchup T. Higgins had on the outside with the corner that was covering him. But Jordan Akins here, if the Browns do decide they want to throw the ball, maybe they try to use the middle of the field and use Jordan Akins. Now that David Njoku is out, Cedric Tillman is also out. Elijah Moore has been uninvolved in the offense. They have no starting running backs. The only healthy, skilled position player is Jerry Jeudy. So without David Njoku, Jordan Akins is going to absorb a lot of the snaps. Saw 8 targets last week, and a really cheap price tag of $3,000 can definitely be paid off with the volume that he's going to be seeing. So without further ado, let's just make a sample lineup here. I am going to take Joe Burrow and automatically stack him with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and bring it back with George Pickens. I like playing Pat Freiermuth here for $3,900. It's pretty easy to get behind a Ravens defense against a Browns offense that probably won't be able to throw the ball or move the ball at all, which leaves us with $4,200. I think we're going to need to get really cheap here with the flex. I am going to actually flex in I will actually flex in Jordan Akins. And let's just see what this looks like. Gives us $4,900 now. So we can go Foreman, we can go Mitchell. If Chase Brown is out, I'm going to assume that Herbert is in, so I will take Herbert there. It's really hard not to play Deontay Foreman. We might need to do some shifting around here. Let's just think. So we're going to go with Burrow, with Chase, Higgins, bring it back with Pickens, Freiermuth, Akins, In the Ravens, at running back, I'm actually going to pivot off of Jalen Warren, and I'm going to go to Najee Harris because Najee Harris is still getting volume. 13 carries last game against the Chiefs. Saw 4 targets, which I like. Earlier this year, he's been seeing a lot of targets, but he started losing that work to Jalen Warren. But he's $500 cheaper, and that will allow us to fit in Keaton Mitchell. The Chase Brown situation is still a little ambiguous. I don't like the game script for Deontay Foreman, but I do like the volume. I like the game script for Keaton Mitchell, and I do like the volume that Harris is still seeing at a really cheap price. So we are going to submit this, and that will be one of our lineups for tomorrow. The other thing I wanted to take a look at is I like going to Daily Fantasy Fuel to get a feel for what the optimizers are suggesting. I don't know why it's not working, but it doesn't look like we will be able to test any of these lineups. Oh well, we'll try some other time. But thanks for watching. That's how I'm approaching this slate. I like that Bengals. I like that Steelers game. I'm probably going to game stack that one. I will try to have at least one lineup with some Ravens players in it, just in case the game script doesn't go to plan. You always have to have some sort of risk mitigation there. Even if you do see something playing out, you can't go full in on it. I mean, you can, and if it doesn't go your way, then you're pretty much out of the whole contest. But do try to reserve a small pool, maybe 10%, for the outcome that you think is least likely to happen. But yeah, any comments, feedback, any thoughts that you want to share on the video, please feel free to send that through. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment on any of the content here. Once we get to 100 subscribers, I will be giving away $20 PayPal so that you could use that for an entry into a Millie Maker contest. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.